Look, we all know the story of Superman and how he became one of the greatest heroes in the entire DC universe. A fan favorite blessed with a power that rivals that of gods. But what if we took that power and threw it into the My Hero Academia verse? How would that impact the story? Well, watch to the end to find out.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
We start our story in stereotypical fashion. The birth of Kal-El, or his human name, Izuku Midoriya. Born looking just like Deku in the original, so no changes there, and the imminent destruction of his planet still being a thing. This leads to Izuku being sent off and then crash landing on Earth, only to be found by both Inko and Hiashi, who were both simple farm workers making ends meet, until suddenly, their lives were changed, when a miracle child appeared. And, well, both of them looking at this boy just decided to raise them. I mean, they couldn't have a child of their own, so this was as if God had sent them to them. They were thankful. Izuku would spend most of his childhood helping his dad out with the family farm and watching as much All Might content as he possibly could, as well as hero stuff, seeing as this is just the kind of things that Izuku just loved to see. He would grow up idolizing All Might and train with his dad to control his powers. Obviously his dad didn't have the same powers, but he would help him get a decent control over them, telling him that he's free to train here, seeing as they have a huge amount of land that they grow crops on, so Izuku could use his flight abilities and get used to his X-ray vision, his super hearing, and things of that nature. Through the years, Izuku got better and better at using his powers, and even though at first it was kind of a hindrance, seeing as he was not used to the climate, the gravity of this planet, or any of its, any of its features that came with this planet, it was a little tough to get used to. But after growing up with his father and mother in an insanely good environment, Izuku, well, he got the hang of things and became very powerful, very strong for his age. Izuku and Inko noticed that Izuku had these strange abilities. He had super strength, he could fly, he had powerful breath, he had a X-ray vision, he had heat visions, enhanced hearing, super speed, and insane durability. Suffice to say, Izuku was stacked from the jump. And I'm not about to downplay him either to make the story make sense or anything like that. He's going to be as strong as he is in the movies and in the shows. I guess in the comics as well, but he'll never have to go all out, to be honest. That said, one day Izuku would be working out on the farm like usual when his father would pretty much end up pulling up on him while he was using his super breath to cool down the crops. This is when his mother and dad would end up telling him about them saving up money to send him to UA, and Izuku, when he hears this, he would say, "Wait, Mom, Dad, you're not serious, right?" They both look at him, nod, and Izuku would be so happy, jumping with joy. He would literally leap to the air and just begin flying in circles, being like, "Woohoo!" You know what I mean? Like, this man is excited. And Inko and Aoshi would look at each other, look down, and kind of have smiles on their faces, as they both know that they really could not ever afford this, but they're gonna do what they have to do. And if it means selling a little acres of land to help him get started with the first year of UA, then that's what they'll do. They'll figure out the rest as they go. Izuku would then land, and he would explain to them that he is so happy with them saying that they already signed him up and that they know that with a heart like his, he'll be an incredible hero. They embrace, and from here, we have a small time skip to the day when Izuku finally has to go take his UA entrance exam. This would go much like many of you would expect. Now, when Izuku would arrive at UA's doors, he would think to himself that the school was way bigger than he had imagined. So much different seeing it in person than seeing it on a computer screen. He would walk inside and go to take the test, which he does relatively well on. Izuku is not dumb by any means, and my man just aces it. Then he goes on to proceed to go to the robot portion, where he simply sits outside and, he's wearing these basic clothes. He kind of looks a little poor, but everybody was not really paying too much attention to him. Deku's doing a little bit of stretching, and it's suddenly when President Mike would begin explaining to everybody that there's no countdown, so they gotta go, go, go. Izuku hearing this would be like, "Oh, go, okay, yeah, sure." As he flies off, like is with a supersonic boom. He literally like leaps up into the air and everybody would be pushed back by his strength. Izuku then goes on to land on top of a robot as he punches it down and destroys the entire thing, resulting in an insane explosion. And all of the exam proctors that were watching all of this go down would be absolutely stunned. They are shocked. Izuku would then go on to destroy robot after robot, displaying his insane amount of skills, his heat vision, his x-ray vision to locate new robots at every second he could get. He would grab them and rip them apart with his bare hands and punch through multiple of them. He would end up racking up 100 points before 1 minute was even over, using his x-ray vision and super breath to absolutely demolish these robots, using his super speeds to the point where the cameras begin having even trouble keeping up with him. Izuku was in a league of his own entirely, and he moved like a pro hero, every decision calculated, and everything he did was for a reason. He threw robots into buildings, causing them to explode, and he would just completely manhandle these robots that would have given even pro heroes some trouble. This would shock all of the UA proctors, and one of the people who would take a keen interest on him would definitely be All Might. Around this time, he was planning to give the quirk to Mirio, but he hadn't quite decided things. But after seeing this kid and his performance, he decided right there and then that he was going to be his successor. Nezu watching this would think to himself that this kid is having a bright future. This kid is going to be something later in life, and he does not doubt that in any way, shape, or form. Izuku is going to be the next symbol of peace. And from what he's displaying, this is not too many years far-fetched. All Might will maybe finally be able to retire and become a full-time teacher. Izuku would continue destroying robot after robot until eventually the 0-pointer would arrive, and once Izuku gets a glimpse of this giant robot, he remembers that, it's worth 0 points. So he proceeds to continue flying around destroying more robots until eventually, using his x-ray vision, he could see that somebody was actually screaming out for help. Not only could he see her through the walls, but he could also hear her. And him being who he is, decides that, points or not, he's going to save her. He begins to fly over the roof as he lands right next to her, and he throws the rubble off of Uraraka. As Uraraka's like, thank you, but we gotta... She looks up and is immediately just scared. She is terrified. Like, her life literally flushed out of her eyes. And she looks to Izuku, who just has a smile on his face as she just can't breathe. It's as if time stopped. But Izuku holds one hand up, and he would stop the 0-pointer's foot from crushing them as he topples the entire 0-pointer over with one hand. The 0-pointer would be sent across flying into the buildings as Izuku would tell her not to worry, that he wasn't going to let anything happen to her. And Uraraka would immediately pass out. She is shocked. She thought she was going to die. But Izuku saved her, and she could not be more thankful. By the time she woke up, he was gone, and Izuku, well, had pretty much fled the area. He ended up flying back home at supersonic speeds and ended up arriving in about a couple seconds time. Izuku, he did what he was going there to do. And when he arrived home, he told his parents the good news and how well he had performed, saying that he had saved the girl's life and that he's glad he was there, because had he not been there, things might have ended up a little messy. His parents would both be extremely ecstatic and excited at Izuku, because, I mean, this is all they've ever wanted. Ever since he was a kid, they knew he was special. And, well, they couldn't have expected any less from him. Izuku would then go on to have an extremely good day with his family, where they would celebrate and have an amazing time together. Eventually the nighttime would arrive, and you guys know how it is. If you guys have ever had your birthday the next day, it's extremely hard to go to sleep when you're extremely excited about something. And Izuku is just happy. He's so excited to get his acceptance letter, and he genuinely thinks that he's going to be getting accepted to UA. However, seeing as he can't sleep, he decides to go out, and to not wake his parents up, he's really quiet. He ends up going to the kitchen where he finds a bill, and it actually says that they're overdue to pay their farmhouse. When Izuku sees this, he's immediately shocked and is wondering what's going on. When he ends up digging further, he finds more overdue bills and decides that maybe them saving money away for his high school tuition is making it so that they can't afford the farm. Izuku looks down at the ground, knowing what he has to do, that he can't go to UA. This is not something that is going to be happening anytime soon. Maybe he can go to another school, maybe something that isn't that expensive, or maybe just stay on the farm to help his family out, because family comes first, being a hero comes second. Izuku would be very disappointed and would leave the letter on the counter right where he had left it. For the following next couple of days, he would be really upset, but anytime that his family would look at him, he would have a smile on his face and pretend everything's okay. You guys know how that goes. Izuku is doing his best not to let it show, but eventually Inko and Hiyashi would end up noticing that something's off. He simply chalks it up to being a random little phase, and they both have no clue what could possibly be the problem, so they just leave it alone. Eventually, the first day of UA happens, and Izuku just says, "Bye, Mom and Dad." He throws on his uniform and ends up flying around wondering what he should do. When eventually, he hardens his nerves and decides, there's nothing he can do. Of course he got accepted into UA with that performance, but what's he gonna do after his parents can't afford the farm? Like, what are they gonna do? Live out on the streets? He can't let his family be homeless over some dream of becoming a hero. He thinks to himself that quitting the course is what's best for everybody, and he ends up flying to that of UA, where once he arrives, he requests to speak to Nezu. The heroes would end up obliging, and Aizawa would ask him why he wasn't there. He would say that he's exactly coming here for that same reason, to talk to Nezu about it, and Aizawa would take him to Nezu's office, where Izuku would sit down and would look at Nezu, then going on to say, "Hey, principal, got a second?" Nezu would say, "Oh, of course, Izuku. Papa C, would you like some tea?" Izuku says, "Yeah, sure, thank you." He accepts it and begins drinking and thinking to himself, "Wow, this is really good." But from here, Nezu would say, "So, what can I help you with, young man?" When Izuku would then go on to explain to him that he's thankful for the opportunity to be in a course like UA, but unfortunately, he's not going to be able to pay the tuition. He's not going to be able to pay his own life things if he attends this school, saying that thank you so much for the opportunity, but as things stand, that this is not going to be a possibility for him, saying thank you for his time, getting up and beginning to walk away. Before Nezu would say, "Wait, what are you talking about?" And Izuku says, "Didn't you hear me?" Nezu would say, "I heard you all right, but that shouldn't be an issue. We can have that all covered. A hero of your caliber to not attend this school? That would be a crime. That would be like doing the worst thing ever. A hero with a potential like yours to not attend this school would just be lunacy. It just wouldn't make sense." He looks at Izuku, and Izuku's eyes would immediately light up, asking if he's serious. Nezu would say that he's going to be having a full ride to the school with everything covered. Not only that, but he also ends up handing Izuku a $10,000 check for the money that his parents would have already put into the UA high school to get him as far as he did. Izuku holds the check in his hand, and tears begin coming out of his eyes as he just thanks Nezu. And the kid cannot thank him enough. Let me put that into words. He cannot thank him enough. Imagine you can't afford to pay your school, and suddenly your principal hands you a scholarship and $10,000. That right there, that's enough to make a grown man cry. Izuku, after this, would fly home to tell his family the good news, and he would end up telling them that he saw the note the day that he took the entrance exam. They would say that they actually ended up suspecting that, but that, they tried not to say anything about it as to not put him down. And Izuku says that things have changed. They would ask what he's talking about, and he informs them on the good news. They're all extremely ecstatic, and they end up paying off all the bills that they had to pay off, when Izuku would then go on to tell them that he promises to make them proud at the school. They would both nod, telling him that they know he's going to make them proud. And from here, the next day of UA would finally arrive. Izuku flies to that of UA High, and once he makes it to the door of his classroom, he takes in a deep breath before thinking to himself, "This is it. The path to becoming a hero. I can't wait for what awaits for me." He takes a step inside, only to see everybody sitting around and wondering what's going on. He goes to the front of the classroom and introduces himself as Izuku Midoriya, saying sorry he's here late, that he was caught up yesterday. The people of the class would look at him and say, "Welcome." A bunch of the lighthearted people would welcome him with open arms, and someone like Bakugo would say, "We didn't miss you at all. Go to your seat, loser." From here, Izuku just looks at him with a mean snarl and just decides to take a seat. And out of nowhere, from the corner of his eyes, he notices someone. Now, this someone is extremely gorgeous in his eyes. This would be Momo Yaoyorozu. And yes, I know what you're gonna say and think. Another Momo ship? Yes, another Momo ship. Who would have been a better option for this what if? You tell me in the comments down below, because I'm not about to have this be started at all. Anywho though, All Might from here would end up bursting through the door after Izuku introduces himself and takes his seat. And he would proceed to say that he's walking through the door like a normal person, before then opening the wall to reveal all of their hero costumes. Now, when Izuku sees his, he is ecstatic, and everybody would go to the changing rooms to put on their costumes. However, before I get into the next part of the what if, first, I need to tell you guys about the sponsor of today's video, fandom. As anime fans, we love to show our support to our favorite shows by rocking anime apparel. But something I'm pretty sure we can all agree on is it's so expensive. So I've partnered up with Fandom to bring you all affordable, high quality anime merch that you are sure to love. And if you use my code ZETHER at checkout, you can even get an extra 10% off the already affordable merch. Keep in mind, it does come from overseas sellers, so its sizing is going to be different since it's overseas. That said, let's get back into the video. Jumping back into the story, we immediately cut to Izuku and everybody else with their hero suits on, and everybody would be pretty much complimenting each other. Everyone's hero suit, with the exception of Todoroki's, is awesome. And All Might would actually see Izuku's costume and think to himself that it's pretty reminiscent to one of his old costumes. He would ask him if he got some inspiration from him, and Izuku would kind of like put his hand behind his head, saying that he's guilty as of what he ended up pretty much asking him. All Might laughs, and Izuku would say that he thinks it actually suits him, with All Might saying, oh, he of course thinks the same thing. I mean, he looks even better in it than he does, saying that the color scheme was definitely a good choice, and that the blue and the red contrast each other perfectly, with Izuku actually being clowned on by Bakugo for having his underwear on the outside. Everybody else would actually defend him, saying that, you know, that choice was actually awesome. And Bakugo would begin to wonder to himself why everybody's hyping him up so much. Eventually though, All Might would explain the rules of the Heroes versus Villains event, and the two pairings would actually end up being Deku and Momo versus Todoroki and Invisible Girl. And yes, I chose Deku and Momo on purpose so Izuku could get the chance to show off for Momo, if you know what I'm saying. So yeah, eventually the test would start, and Izuku would tell Momo to simply stay behind him, that he's going to be single-handedly helping them pass, asking her about her quirk and doing a little bit of small talk with Momo, kind of flirting it up a little bit, but nothing too, too deep. That said though, eventually they would end up making it to the third floor of the exam place, where they would notice that it's extremely cold. I mean, even Momo was getting a little cold. She would make herself a jacket, and from here they would continue going up to the floor where Todoroki and Invisible Girl were at. Once there, Izuku thinks to himself what the coolest thing that he could possibly do would be, and so he decides that he's just gonna punch the door down. He does so, and it actually ends up being sent flying towards Todoroki, who has to dodge out of the way. But by the time that he gets up, Izuku's standing right in front of him in such an awesome pose. And Todoroki would immediately shoot ice at him, shooting a small geyser at him. But the ice would simply hit Izuku and he would not move. He would be frozen in solid ice. Todoroki would wonder to himself if maybe he took it a little too far, but this is when the ice would begin to vibrate due to him using his super speed, and it begins melting as Izuku breaks straight out of it and then looks at Todoroki and says that it's no fun to play that way, before Todoroki shoots another geyser at him, but Izuku uses his super breath to just break the ice before it can even get to him. And then from there would go on to look towards the direction of Invisible Girl, who was trying to wrap him up with the tape, before saying that he could see her. He has x-ray vision. Momo would just be watching all of this go down in the span of a couple of seconds, wondering to herself just how strong this kid is, before Izuku would then look to them and take them both out, before then rushing to the bomb and touching it, so that All Might could finally say the magic words, "Hero Team wins." Everybody who's watching this would be extremely ecstatic at what's happening, and All Might would just have his questions answered perfectly. He now knows that he wants to give all for one to Izuku. And so he would begin to actually tell Izuku to actually stay after class, with him introducing himself and his injury as well as one for all to Izuku, telling him that he wants him to be his successor. Deku, upon hearing everything, would think about it for a second and say, "You know, All Might, I've looked up to you for such a long time, but I say let someone else have it. Look, honestly, I've looked up to you my whole life, and there's really nothing I'd want more than to accept your quirk. But Mom and Dad have always told me to help others, and Something like that could change another person's life, you know? Give it to someone more deserving, maybe with no strength to do things alone, maybe someone quirkless, someone with a heroic heart. All Might stops to think about this, and then looks to Izuku and asks him if he's sure. And Izuku would tell him that he already has all that he needs to become a pro hero, with All Might telling him that he could save the world with a quirk like this with his power. But Deku says that he already can. He's one step closer with him being in the school. And All Might just decides to accept what Izuku's saying. I mean, it is his choice and he's not going to force something onto Izuku. But All Might would just have one request of Izuku. He wants to know just how strong he really is. And Izuku would look at him before saying, "You want to spar?" All Might would say, "Precisely, young Midoriya." Like for part 2!